Good evening. My name is Amy Boff, and I'm the Executive Director of United Policyholders. How many of you, for how many of you is this your first Roadmap to Recovery workshop? Show of hands. Okay, so it looks like we have a lot of regulars, which is great. United Policyholders, as you may know, we have a program called the Roadmap to Recovery. We've been running this program since 1991, right after the Oakland Berkeley fire. That kind of happened right when we had a working group forming and saying, geez, it seems like insurance consumers need a place to go, a safe place to go to get information, support that isn't somebody trying to sell them something. We're a voice and an information resource for insurance consumers around the country. We have a 26-year track record, subject matter expertise in insurance and disaster recovery. We don't take money from insurance companies so that we are always free to tell you the straight scoop without any spin. We're funded by donations and grants. We have a volunteer corps of folks who have personal or professional expertise in insurance, construction, law, rebuilding, taxes. So first I want to thank all of you for taking the time to come out and absorb the information that we want to give you. We have a fantastic speaker panel tonight that's primarily here to answer your questions. So as we go through the very little bit of content that we want to present to you, I want you to be thinking about the questions that you want to ask. We really try to keep our ear to the ground in this community as best we can. I want to thank Vida Iskander, who was out there helping sign in, who's not only did she lose her house, but she's been an incredible organizer. So how many of you are on part of a group, a listserv of people insured by the same company? Okay, that's great. Okay, so these are the topics we're going to cover tonight. We're going to do a quick review of rebuild or replace, some issues again that people have been coming to us to say they're having problems with. ALE benefits, the hot topic around here lately for a lot of people, debris removal bills, building code, permit requirements, proving up construction and code compliance costs to your insurer's satisfaction, fund control during construction, financial decision points for financing costs not covered by insurance, real estate and property tax considerations, and then we'll have Q&A. We're going to do a quick review of options for the underinsured, just because every day we're getting those questions. We've covered this topic now about four different workshops, so I'm not going into any depth here. I'm going to give you the quick review. What are your options? Produce evidence and arguments that convince your insurer to voluntarily reform your policy or pay over limits, or participate in an individual or group lawsuit with an experienced policyholder lawyer. PH is policyholder. So that means not somebody who just started doing insurance litigation this week or last week or last year, but somebody who actually has a reputation with the insurance industry as a force to be reckoned with. It's really important. This is one of those areas where the stronger your attorney is, the better the outcome. I mean, I'm sure that's always the case, but particularly with insurance, it's the case. There are some very, very good attorneys available to you, and I just, again, caution people to really probe for the expertise and not just go for somebody that you have a personal connection to. Okay, you can also participate in a suit against a utility or another at-fault party for losses that you have that are not being compensated. And then your theories for asserting liability against an agent or broker, insurer, or vendor for underinsuring your home can include breach of contract, fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, misrepresentation, negligence, defective product. Those are just fancy words to let you know that this is a thicket, not for the faint of heart. It's a little challenging, but it can be done, and it is being done all the time. Rebuild or replace by buying. And again, we've covered this many times already, so we're just going to give you the quick hit. In California, unlike almost any other state, there's only one other state that gives you this right in your state's codes, and that is the right to replace your home by buying instead of rebuilding, and be able to collect the full benefits that you would have been entitled to had you rebuilt on your original site. Now, because we're one of the only states that gives you that right, there's a lot of confusion out there. A lot of adjusters do not really understand it, and now it turns out a lot of insurance companies are taking positions about that statute that we think are flat out wrong. So I'm pretty sure some of you are going to end up having to litigate this issue of that you have decided to buy and you want the full benefits that you would have been entitled to, and your insurer is putting up obstacles and saying, for example, that we don't pay those, you won't have available your code upgrade benefits because you're not incurring them. We don't think that argument flies. We think the statute is very clear that you get all the benefits. And the legislature, and I want to thank the gentleman here who shared with me, he did some legislative research. A bill just got passed, 1800, Levine. It's not retroactive, so you can't use it directly, but it's very, you can use it in arguing with your insurance company that it, and then the legislative intent goes into the fact that the statute is quite clear and that all the legislature said they were doing was clarifying. So in our view, you get all your benefits exported, but again, this is definitely a fight that people are in with a number of insurers, not all, but some. The overview, you need to, buying a replacement home, you need to reach an agreement with your insurer on the dollar amount it would theoretically cost if you did rebuild the exact same home that was destroyed. That includes code upgrade coverage, and extended benefits should be available. Generally, that is what the insurer owes you up to policy limits. And again, adjusters may have a knee-jerk reaction when they say, oh, well, you're trying to buy something that's different. We don't owe that for the difference. We owe for the whatever it was that you would have put back. And again, that is true. That is true. The measure of what they owe you is what it would cost to put back. So there is some fact and evidence you have to develop about what that theoretical cost would have been, but you should be entitled to that to buy. And this is just, the statute is very clear in our view. Unfortunately, some insurers are not seeing it that way. We feel that it should include ordinance and law. Some policies and some insurers are seeking to avoid paying extended coverage and code upgrade compliance benefits toward purchase of a new home. I talked about the recently enacted legislation. It's not retroactive, but it is influential. It is silent on land value. What are the arguments that we suggest making against an insurer that's trying to take a deduction for the value of land under the house that you want to buy to replace? Number one, land is not insured, so that should be irrelevant. Two, the insurer can't invent an exclusion or deduction that's not in the policy contract. Three, if the new home, including the land, is the same price as the cost of rebuilding the old home, not including the land, then it's arguably a lesser home anyway. So they have no business saying that you've been unjustly enriched by buying a house and now having two lots. And then one strategy some people have used, if they want to try to get this resolved without going the distance of a battle, is you can show the insurer information for a more expensive house and then show them that if you were to buy that house and back out land cost, they'd end up paying the same amount that they would pay you if you rebuilt the house that you had. And sometimes just giving them that information and that argument can win the day. Okay, so for more information, you can go to our website. We have a link to a letter from the Department of Insurance that will help you argue for getting the extended benefits towards your purchase. I'm going to turn the mic over. Sandy Watts, take it away.
Hi everyone, my name is Sandy Watts. Some of you might have met me before, but I'm with United Policyholders. And so we're getting a lot of questions. I tend to field a lot of the technical questions that come in. I'm an ex-adjuster. I was an adjuster for 25 years, so I come from the insurance side. We're getting a lot of questions about additional living expenses. Has anybody been notified by their insurer that their ALE is going to be cut off here if they don't produce? Okay, yeah, that is a very problematic situation. We want to talk about ALE, what they owe you, when they can cut you off, when they can't cut you off, and how to sort of approach this situation where they're sort of threatening. Some people I've heard from, they've actually had a date, you know, that the insurer says they're going to cut them off the ALE. So we want to talk about this. California Insurance Code 2051.5, that is the one, I mean, we keep talking about it every month when we come back. But this is the one that talks about additional living expenses, okay? And there's two issues. Everybody kind of goes in on the 24 months, and this is a new thing. We're one of the only states in the United States that has a 24-month period. Some of the companies are extending them in other states, but a lot of them that I've looked at, they're still 12 months. So that's a good thing for us. The key on here is but shall be subject to other policy provisions. So that's sort of the part that the insurance companies are hanging their hat on. They're saying, yeah, we'll pay you 24 months, but it's subject to the policy provisions. So makes the policy provisions really important, okay? And it's important to know what your policy says, okay, because that kind of tells you. And the policies are different, and it's very interesting. It's I just had an experience last week where we were looking at one policy and it was actually not the right policy. So again, I'm going to reiterate that you need to make sure that the policy that you have and that you're reading and relying on is the policy that was actually in force. And so at the very bottom of your policy, kind of on the side, there's tiny little letters, and they usually say like FE something something, and they have a date. Make sure that the date and the number match your declarations page so that you're working, because as we learned, there's vast differences even in the same company on different policy issuances. So you need to know what yours is, and then you need to know your limits. As some of you guys know, some companies have no money limit. State Farm, for instance, says reasonable amount incurred to maintain your standard of living. They don't have a cap in most cases. Other companies have an actual cap where, you know, what you get is your limits, like the other limits. So you need to know that as well. So it does matter. So these are just some examples, okay? This happens to be a State Farm policy, general policy, and this is important because you've got different coverages based on different carriers. And so this is State Farm. They have additional living expenses up to 24 months, and their fair rental value only applies if that part of the residence premises is rented out. So that's to be differentiated, for example, between CSAA. So this is a CSAA policy, and you get your choice. And I didn't print out I forgot to put on the part that says in the policy that you get your choice, that the insured gets to choose. Between ALE, which is your reasonable expenses incurred, or the fair rental value, okay, which would be how much would your house have rented out for, you know, before the loss. In most cases, if you have this option, you're probably better off doing this fair rental value, collecting the money for your house, and then you have a little bit more leeway in doing what you need to do to sort of stretch it out, save it, or whatever. So that's important to know which one you have and which one you're using. So you need to go, if you're having any questions, go back and read your policy. Either way, ask. Even if you have one of the policies that says that you only get the costs incurred, the additional living expense, like that first State Farm one I showed you, it will not hurt to ask. Different insurers have different sort of leeway in whether or not they're going to pay you the actual costs incurred or whether they'll pay you the fair rental. And I've heard some people who've gone in and said, look, my house would have been worth X amount a month. Can I have that? And pay me that every month instead of renting me this apartment or whatever. And then they've done something creative with it. They've gone out and bought a trailer or just done something else with it that's a little more flexible, gives them maybe a little bit more time and ways to stretch that out. It never hurts to ask. I always tell people, you know, even if it's not there, go in and ask them certain things. ALE is one thing that they have kind of a little bit more discretion on. There's a lot more negotiation that can go on under ALE. ALE and depreciation are the two things you can negotiate the most on these things. So it never hurts to ask, and if you can get that fair rental value, it can help you. Even now, even it's not too late. Okay, so let's talk about this threatening to cut you off. The policy says, the shortest time required to repair or replace the premises or for your household to settle elsewhere. Therein is the, the squishy part, okay? So what's the shortest time? Who are we talking about? So this is a really easy provision to apply if somebody, say, has a kitchen fire. Run of the mill, they do a lot of them, it's a short-term thing, it's reasonable, it's going to take X amount of time, they do it all the time. Great, you can enforce this pretty easily. But what about a situation where 6,000 people have lost their homes? There's labor shortages, there's material shortages. It's just a mess. So the shortest time is very ambiguous. And so we did a case law search. There's not a ton of cases out there. There are not a ton of cases out there addressing this, but the one that we did find was a State Farm case where they went to appraisal, which is basically, if you can't agree with your insurance company, appraisal is one way you can value the amount of your loss. They went to appraisal, the insurance company said, okay, this should have been done in 5 months, your 5 months is passed, and so 2 months after the appraisal, they cut them off. They said, you already had your 5 months, even though they had only finished the appraisal 2 months before. Anyway, the reconstruction went the full 5 months, it went to court, and the court said, no, you have to pay them for the actual time it took from the date that you settled on the amount, as that one was set by appraisal, but the time that the amount is set, then they start rebuilding, and if 5 months is kind of a reasonable amount, then go there. And the courts, in fact, said that this shortest time to repair was ambiguous, right? And since these types of policies are written by the insurers, any ambiguities are decided in favor of the policyholder. So they straight out said that this part is ambiguous. So some of the people I've spoken to are still negotiating their coverage A dwelling settlement and getting the threat of having their ALE cut off. I don't think that that's proper. I think that once you've settled your coverage A dwelling, you need to take steps to move forward in a reasonable manner. But if you're still negotiating, there's no way to start rebuilding because you don't know how much you're going to rebuild, how much you're going to have to rebuild. So I think in cases like that, you need to reach an agreement with them on, okay, I'm going to start now, but I can't start until we have a coverage A agreement, okay? So just make sure that the delays on the coverage A, that you're getting back to them. If you haven't reached an agreement yet, make sure that your end of the work is being done and that you're getting back to them, and that any delays, you can say, hey, look, I sent you my estimate 5 months ago and we still don't have an agreement. It's not my fault that this isn't settled. So I think that's really important. When you talk to them about it, talk about the challenges. They should know this, they really should, but the fact of the matter is a lot of these adjusters are new, they're just sitting down, they're in a cubicle in Texas, they don't really know what's going on. So you need to talk to them about all the challenges, and if they delayed settling your claim, you need to talk to them about it. One of the things that it isn't true is that you don't just get 24 months. It's not automatic. And I've had a lot of people say, well, it says 24 months, can't I just have 24 months and have it be? It's sort of like the contents inventory. They can choose to do that if they want to do it. If they want to pay your contents 100% up front, they can do it. But also, in actuality, is you have to, in real life, you have to document your contents, and in this, you have to actually show that you're making some progress on buying or replacing. So just be in contact with them. So this is what I was just saying. The 24 months isn't automatic. They are entitled to know reasonable progress, but make sure it's reasonable. Some of these requests are really kind of out there. They want to talk to this person and that person, and I think that just a couple things, just to show that you're doing what you're doing, should be enough. And then the last thing is, ask for an extension. If you feel like you're going to run out of of ALE. It's going to be a carrier by carrier basis. I hate to say it. Some of them are going to agree and some of them aren't. I heard from one carrier from an adjuster last week that they're going to consider going over the 24 months because they consider it's one with a limit. They consider it, well, we have this money in our limits, and as long as you haven't run out of limits, we're not going to stop it at 24 months. I wouldn't hang your hat on it, but you definitely need to ask. And that's it. And then we'll take questions after.
Yeah, so as you know, if you participated in the ROE program, the Government Consolidated Cleanup Program, you should have no out-of-pocket costs related to your debris removal. The county, however, is in the position of ensuring that there's what the federal government calls duplication of benefits. That is to say that if you've got your property cleaned up through the Government Consolidated Cleanup Program, then you aren't entitled to just keep debris removal money. However, in many instances, we will collect nothing from your insurance company, and that is just fine with the county. The county is not interested in collecting a lot of money to turn over to the federal government. We would much rather have everybody use as much of their policy as they can for a rebuild, and in many cases, that will happen. One of the complicating things with the debris removal collection process will be that every property, every claim, every policy and every company is going to be different. So each situation is going to be very unique. So to that end, we're going to hire a third-party claims administrator who's going to work case by case, one-on-one with each property owner and their insurer to make sure that that the county only collects as much as is absolutely required to ensure no duplication of benefit, and that you get the benefit of as much as possible of your insurance policy. There's generally speaking two types of policies, and I feel a little awkward talking to you guys about this because you know much more than I do, but there's generally two types of policies. There's the policy that's going to call out a specific dollar amount for debris removal. That amount will be collected unless you have receipts, invoices, statements that show you used that money for an allowable purpose. Generally speaking, that allowable purpose is debris removal, but the federal government just this week allowed that any activities that are done to remediate the damage that was done by U.S. Army Corps or any over-excavation that was done by U.S. Army Corps, that you can now use that money for that purpose. We'll accept that receipt, and then that'll be it, and we'll only collect what the excess is. The other type of policy is the one that calls out a percentage, generally 5% of your other coverages as debris removal. The only way we would collect from that is if you had any excess after you were done rebuilding. And there's a letter. What it says is, in the event that coverage for debris removal are not provided on the basis of a specified amount, but are included within another coverage category, payment to the county shall be limited to the unused benefit in that coverage after the residence is rebuilt. I think that's really important because that says that if you're underinsured, you won't have any excess, and we won't collect anything, and that's just fine by us. So what are the next steps? Well, first, we have to wait for the federal government and the state government to hand over cost reports. We have not seen any cost reports for any properties, but each property will have an individual cost report of what it costs to remove the debris from that property. We will then work with that third-party administrator. We're already in the process of contracting, so that way they can work with you with that cost report, with your insurer, and with you, like I said, to ensure that you're not going to pay any more than is absolutely necessary to ensure that there's no duplication of benefit. We're anticipating that we'll have a contract in place by mid-February. That is probably before, I would anticipate that is before the state will release any cost reports to us. But in either case, we're going to start working, and we may even start reaching out to property owners and insurers before we have those cost reports, so we're ready. There's really, I've heard some anxiety around, what's going to happen when it's in your interest, in my opinion, to take a breath and not be in a rush. We're not in a rush to collect anything, and we want to make sure that you rebuild and you use all of the money to rebuild your home before we start collecting anything. In many cases, and like I said, company by company is going to be different. Some people are getting checks. If you feel comfortable holding on to that dollar amount in the event that you have to pay anything, if you have to pay anything back, if you want to hold on to it, hold on to it, and any receipts, statements, or invoices you have for debris removal activity, you can do that. If you feel uncomfortable holding on to that, we have set up an account in the Sonoma County Treasury where you can put that money aside, and then at the end of this, when it settles out, if you do any reimbursement from that, we will issue checks for reimbursement. There's probably a lot of questions. I can't guarantee that I'll be able to answer all of them tonight. As I said, there's roughly 4,000 properties involved in the program, and there's probably 4,000 different scenarios for each of those properties. But I'll do my best to answer questions, and then we can take down, I'll give you some contact information. I'll leave some cards at the back so you can reach out to us, and we can start answering any questions that you have. That's all I have.
That's great. Okay, so our next speaker,
Greg Walsh with the Sonoma County Assessor's Office. I've asked him to touch on these 3 topics: the tax basis for your rebuilt home, the tax basis for replacement home purchase, and then land valuation for a lot under purchase replacement home. Thank you so much, Greg.
Thanks, Amy. So I'm from the assessor's office. We're the ones that determine what the assessed value of the property is, and then we give those values over to the tax collector, and they're the ones that issue the bills and in some cases refunds. So that's just kind of frame like what we do. So last year what happened after the fire was we reassessed over 6,000 properties starting in early October, and we were more or less complete with about 98–99% of those before the tax bills were due December 10th. So it was an amazing feat that our office was able to process that many roll corrections and get those out to people before their tax bill was due. So we made adjustments, issued tax bills. Generally what we did on properties that were 100% burned was we revalued the land and we took off a percentage because of them having to have all the debris removed, and so we took off approximately about a third of the land value on that, and then we took off all of the improvement values, and we did that for the 3/4 of the year because as of through September, the value of the property was still appropriated, so we made an adjustment for 3/4 of the year, so that's what we did. So now we get on to the next year. So what are we going to do, as far as, what are the options for you people to do out there? So one would be do nothing, but obviously you're here, so you want to do something. So a lot of you are going to rebuild on the same lot, and if you do that, as far as from an assessed standpoint, you're going to have to build back to more or less the same size, the utility, and the function as the old one in order to reserve your, quote, Prop 13 base value. So that's what's happening in a lot of places. I live in Coffee Park in one of the standing homes that was there, so I see the construction every day happen. So that's what's happening with a lot of people. The other thing they're doing is they're building back larger properties than what they had, and that's their option. And I think a lot of people feel like, I know now this is going to be the house I'm in forever, so I'm not going to limit myself to that 1,800 square foot house that was there, so I'm going to make it 2,200 square feet. So that extra 400 square feet that they added, they will have to pay new market value for that portion, but they won't lose their Prop 13 based on the original 1,800. It'll be a combined value for those. So then the other options are, what can I do if I don't want to rebuild? So you can do what's called an intra-county transfer, and that's within our county, and you can actually move your tax base. So you can find another property and you can buy that, and you have the ability to move your tax base to that property. It's for a lot of people that are familiar with how tax assessment goes, a Prop 60 is if you're over 50, 55 years old, you can move your tax base to a property that's equal or lesser and do that, and it's a one-time thing. That's been around for a long time. This is similar to that, but it's actually more generous in the comparisons. Is you can actually find a property worth 120% of the value. So let's say for somebody living in Fountain Grove, if their property was worth $1 million before the fire, they can go find another place and spend up to $1,200,000 and not increase their taxable value. So they get a 20% bump there. And then the other thing this law does is not allow us to say, okay, you're cut off there, you have to find something 120% or not. You can go up to whatever percent that is, and what we'll do is over that 120%, we'll add the market value onto your transferred base value. So it's kind of similar to if you rebuilt your house and just added on square footage, it's the same where we combine those two values. So the other thing you can do is you can go to another county, but you're limited to 11 counties because they had to pass an ordinance in order to do this. And some things are a little bit more restrictive on the ones where the Prop 50 was, it doesn't have to be your principal place of residence, but if you're going to go to another county and transfer your tax base, it does have to be your principal place of residence. You have to do that within 3 years, and it has to be more or less the equal or value, equal or lesser value, so you can't go beyond 120%. So I'll name the 11 counties. It's on our website and also on the State Board of Equalization. But if you're thinking, that's what I want to do, remember it's going to be an equal or lesser value. So Contra Costa County, Los Angeles, Modoc, Orange County, San Diego, San Francisco, Santa Clara, Solano, R County, Sonoma, and Sutter, and Ventura County. So those are the ones you could go to. Yeah, the last one. Okay, land valuation of lot. I just found out about this tonight from me. That apparently, I guess, if you buy a replacement house, the insurance company may not cover the purchase of that, but as far as the land value goes. So I started thinking about that. I was like, well, I guess that makes sense because what you were insuring before was your improvements, not the land. And so when you go buy a new place, they're going to insure the improvements and not the land. So I can see why they might do that. I don't say whether I agree with that or not. Is that?
Well, first, before we, I think the idea there, though, is that it doesn't say anywhere in the policy that they're going to make this deduction, and people assume that the amount that they have available to them is going to be the same amount that they would have been able to spend to rebuild. So, I mean, I guess my question to you is, if somebody's in that situation where the insurance company is saying, we're going to make a deduction for some amount of the land, what kind of document would a person look to challenge their valuation of the land?
That's a good way to frame that, because you might be able to rely on the assessor's office valuation of what they allocate to the land, but it's probably, because we do things on mass appraisal, and as I said, we reassess 6,000 properties just in this alone. So we have to do things where we, look at a lot of mass sales, and then we make comparisons and we make assumptions. So a lot of times we'll have an estimate as to, and so I'll just kind of throw it it might be a percentage, so it might be, 25, 30, 40% of the value might go to the land, and then say 60% would go to the improvement. So that's one method that we might do as an assessor's office, but we do it for assessment purposes. And so a lot of times people will use our information for other reasons, and they're not really supposed to do that. But I mean, some people will make an argument and say, well, the assessor said it was worth this, so they might or might not take that. But I'd say if it comes into a point where that is going to happen to you, where you need to get a land value, I'd really recommend that you hire a fee appraiser. For what could be $300 to $500 or something. It might save you a lot of heartache down the road. And that'd be my recommendation. But if you don't want to spend that money, possibly you could work with a real estate agent, and they can kind of give you an estimate. They'll do what's called a comparative market analysis, and they could probably estimate what the land would be. But there's not a lot of land sales out there. There's more now with the fires going on, and we see land values climbing. So, but the fee appraiser is probably your best bet.
Thank you so much. And then that list of counties that people could move to and keep their tax bases, that will be up on, would that be at SonomaCountyRecovers.org? Or would they go to your?
It'll probably be a link, but it's,
Okay.
I would say go to the State Board of Equalization website.
Okay.
Because they update it.
Okay, so the State Board of Equalization website will have that list of counties that you would be able to relocate to without losing your tax bases. Okay, our next speaker, Patrick Mullen, is with the Permit and Resource Management Department in Sonoma County. He's the ombudsman, and he can give you just a very brief overview of resources available through his agency and issues. Thanks.
Good evening. I'm the customer service ombudsman at the permit department, PRND, or Permit Sonoma these days. One of the things that we realized immediately after the fire was if we tried to process all the permits through the regular department, it was just going to jam things up. We didn't have the staff. We didn't have the time to get the staff. So we immediately worked on getting an outside contractor to set up a satellite office just right outside our building, and the Resiliency Permit Center came around. And they have been processing permits at a really good clip. I'm quite pleased to say currently there's almost 600 homes that have permits. 30 have been finally. There's 140 more in plan check right now. We're about 30% of the homes that were lost are either permitted or in the plan check process right now, which the national average has been 25% rebuild within 5 years after a wildfire. Wildfires typically don't happen in this kind of suburban setting, so it's not quite fair to compare us to Tuolumne or Lake County, but we're moving forward at a pretty good clip, which I'm very happy about. My role is to solve problems in the department, to solve folks who have problems with our department, I should say. So I interface with the Resiliency Center, our Permit Center, almost on a daily basis. So if you are running into problems, I'm a resource, and you can just Google PRND Ombudsman, and my contact information will come right up. I try to help as much as I can. I'm not an advocate for the department, and I'm not an advocate for the citizens. I'm an advocate for the process. If this process, if our processes, the codes allow something to happen, then let's find a way to make it happen. I think, you know, one of the things that comes up is this concept of code upgrades, and I find it very hard to believe that insurance companies are asking people what are the code upgrades required, because if anybody knows what the code upgrades are, it's the insurance companies. The building code is updated every 3 years. If your home was built before 1962 in the county, there was no building department, so there was no building permits, and there was no code applied to the building of your home, probably. If your home was built in the 60s, early 70s, the building code at that time was the size of a small paperback novel. It's gotten larger and larger ever since then to today. You could fill a small library full of books related to the building code. So somebody asking for a specific list of code upgrades is, I don't know, I think they're putting roadblocks in your way. Just right off the bat, you know, a geotech report. So a geologist coming out and a geotechnical engineer looking at the soil, doing profiles. That wasn't required until about the mid-90s, and it was pretty rare that a single-family home would get that. So that's before you even get your plans finished. You're spending money that it's part of the code upgrade. And it just keeps going on and on. Then that geotech report tells you what kind of foundation you should put in, which is going to be a lot stronger than the foundation you had, probably. And it just keeps going. The energy code alone went from something the size of a small magazine to multiple binders, about 4 feet long. So energy code upgrades between, say, the mid-'80s and today would cost probably $10,000 easily, if not more. So I can answer questions about building code issues. I can answer questions about zoning code issues. One of the things our department has been trying to do, along with the county board of supervisors, is find ways to create more housing in this county by allowing a density bonus, more homes on parcels. And there's some, especially depending upon your situation, there's ways to convert a room in a house into a rental unit, a full-time rental unit, and you get some extra income. A junior accessory dwelling unit. If your parcel's large enough, you can do an accessory dwelling unit. Recently, there's been I think they call it a cottage development, where if you have sewer and water, well, I shouldn't go down that road, I'm sorry, because it's, they don't want it in the rebuild areas. The supervisor said, we don't want speculators buying parcels so they can build multiple homes on parcels. And so I'll be around to answer questions, and my heart goes out to you guys, because I know this wasn't something that happened over a year ago in your life. I know you're living it pretty much 24/7, and I try to remind our staff to be sensitive that folks who lost their homes are dealing with it every day. It's not in the past.
Thank you, Patrick, and I have to again commend the public officials in this region, having been in so many regions over the years around the country. It's the Sonoma County and the city of Santa Rosa agencies are definitely head and shoulders above any I've ever seen in terms of responsiveness, empathy, and really wanting to do everything they can to make it easier for y'all. Eileen Freiberger is going to give us a quick rundown on decision points for rebuilders and replacers related to taxes and costs insurance won't cover. And these are just some questions to kind of guide you.
Again, I really appreciate being here tonight, and my heart really goes out to everyone here. United Policyholders has teamed up with the Financial Planning Association, and we have been doing one-on-one sessions. Every piece of information being covered tonight, portions of this, I had to learn in a 30-plus career as a certified financial planner and never saw it happening live. I can't imagine how much information you're taking in order to now make one of your biggest life decisions financially. And you're always probably feeling, is there something I'm missing? So what I want to encourage is I'm going to speak to some of those larger points tonight, but I really want each of you to feel the benefit of having a one-on-one meeting with someone just like myself at these sessions. They have been going on, and the people that are showing up are very experienced certified financial planners, and none of us are there passing out business cards or in any way soliciting or trying to solicit business. You have to go in understanding the people that are there, and they're being led by Chris Remedios from San Francisco. They are very much on top of screening who is there speaking to you. Do they have the expertise to deal with these issues? And do they have the communication skills to realize you might be asking one question, but we have the background to understand the other pieces that are tying into what that personal long-term decision is for you. And each of you have your own priorities as you try to make that decision. So forgive me for a moment, I'm gonna just look up at the board and get a sense of what kinds of questions are coming up, and I'll just generally answer it. Should I rebuild or buy? A lot of this depends on where are you at your stage of life? Were you ready to downsize and move anyway? Did you want to stay in the same community? Is your job and family here? So much of this about is, do you want to stay in the community and in the same spot? It'll then go hand in hand with the proceeds that you're receiving. Is it enough to build and replace what you wanted? Or is that going to be required to go elsewhere or to rent? So again, it's not a very simple question because there's so many other factors that come into it. And that's why that one-on-one consultation, and if it's not at one of our sessions, ask your advisor, your broker, whoever you're working with, are they able to do full, comprehensive financial planning? So that you're not getting that answer isolated, but it's being viewed for all the reasons that are important for you as you make your personal decision. Under the rebuild or buy is also what's the affordability. If you are going above your insurance proceeds and pulling into your own savings, how did that affect your future lifestyle, your future retirement? What other assets were available for you to pull out that cash and still feel comfortable that you're in a good place in the future? So these are the pieces that you need to be aware of. And I know from the folks I've worked with, and I've been to 3 of the sessions myself and worked with many people, you know the questions you're asking, and we're there to help pull out the additional information that you may not realize is as important. So again, come in prepared with what is your pension, what's the Social Security, what kind of savings do you have? Even though you don't have necessarily all of that information available, obviously for the reasons that we all know of, research as best you can and get that from online sources, your employers, but have as much information as you can bring to those sessions for whomever to help you guide for your personal decision. If rebuilding, what size home makes the most sense? Look around the room, you were all in different size homes before this started. There's no one size that's going to fit anyone. The question is, if you have enough, then maybe you're building same size or more. If your finances are a little tighter before this, then honestly, maybe you do need to do something smaller and be able to not extend yourself as much. So there is never going to be a here's average what you should do. Each and every person's situation is absolutely different. Property values of my property, I think again, I cannot get over the level of empathy and expertise that's sitting in these rooms and the team that United Policyholders is pulling together to be there to help answer these questions. The property tax piece is very important. If you're rebuilding and you're able to keep your basis, you're purchasing elsewhere and keeping your basis, very important. But when it's all said and done, even if there weren't a fire, you would never necessarily make a life decision over what was the property tax implication. The much bigger question is, what did it cost you to rebuild? And did you have those proceeds available, or did you have to tap elsewhere? So in some cases, that'll be a significant difference in property tax dollars. In other cases, it may not be. The other side is keeping the basis of your home, and that's very different than the property tax basis. The basis of your house says you bought a property and it was $100,000. Prior to the fire, it was $600,000, $700,000, whatever that is. Now, as you're adding more monies to that home, you're going to add the cost of the new property, your improvements and what you're doing above and beyond, and a future sale is pulling in that basis. If you are currently saying you're not rebuilding, then you're going to be looking at the value of your home prior to the fire. They're going to have a new basis for you, a new market value based on what's available. And your tax issue is each individual has a $250,000 tax-free. A couple will be $500,000 tax-free. So if your home had been $800,000 and $500,000 of it was tax-free, and your original cost might have been 150, 200, but you've done your own improvements, there may be no taxable event at all to you if you then went elsewhere. So again, this is very important that you do take the time, because that's a very important number for people to understand. But again, it's the longer term decision. It's not one that should make a decision for you now necessarily, because you first have to decide, are you staying? Are you moving? Are you rebuilding? And that's the point that you really want to first really take your time deciding and make sure your financials match up with it. How to budget and how does it impact? I'm going to be very brutally honest with this group. If there hadn't been a fire, every person in this room had the exact same problem coming in. So don't accidentally believe that this is isolated just now to you. For all of the people that we've ever worked with, and I'm 30 plus years in my career, these are issues that impact every single person. And now it's compounded because of what you're all going through. And it's very difficult to now not have as much emotion around these decisions, and you are absolutely validated to have your head spin over trying to decide what impact does it have on these other places. It absolutely does, but it also did before, and that's why it's important to recognize you've got to be able to work with someone that you're comfortable by the time you make this decision as to whether or not you are on track for your own retirement, for the kids' college funding. This information has to be addressed for you to be comfortable with that next stage decision. And again, what you need to do first still is take care of yourself. The general rule of thumb, once you've made your home decision, please make sure your own retirement is covered, get back on track with your savings. All of this has to go right back to where you were previously to get you as much as comfortably up to speed as you can. But you have every right to feel overwhelmed and not able to deal with any of this right now because all of these other factors are affecting you. Options for financing and repair. I know we've had some good banks locally that are helping. Continue to look at your different pricing and mortgage rates. Let your current banks go back to them and question, can they do better? Are there better deals? And I know, again, when you're at the meetings, we'll be giving you more specifics about some of the banks, or at least comparing what you have to what we may be finding available elsewhere. Replacement costs not covered by insurance. Again, this is out of pocket, and this is where everyone's going to have to take a look at what's available and where are those proceeds and monies coming from. Should I pay down or off my existing mortgage? Again, you can't answer that in a nutshell. For every person I've ever met with that has to make that decision, ultimately you just have to say to yourself, money in the bank, right now, no risk, FDIC insured. We always recommend online is bankrate.com, and you can see all the different rates available. FDIC insured is key. No risk money, maybe paying 1.5% to 2%. Your mortgage right now is still tax deductible up to the extent that we're all able to take our deductions. So the question is, if your interest rate is 3.5% or 4%, does it make sense to be paying it down sooner? Some people prefer to just knock it out. Others prefer to leave the monies invested and hopefully outperforming it. But this is another calculation and question that comes back to your peace of mind. And when you have a large lump available, it's tempting to immediately say, let me just pay off this mortgage and be done with it. But what if then your liquidity is now still back in the newly built house and replaced home? So again, it's a question of what other assets are available outside and whether or not you want to put that down a little faster. But I caution everyone, it might feel good to take a lump and pay it off and be done. Be very careful you have the liquidity and take a look at the interest rates around it. Again, we were working off of this slide in questions because that's what's come up previously. But as I said, we're all going to be here later. There will definitely be more weekend sessions to work one-on-one with someone like myself. And I really, really just want to encourage each person here to recognize there is not a single answer I would give to two people in the same way, because each person's situation will be very, very unique and different. Keep asking the questions, keep showing up for the sessions. Those of us that have met one-on-one, many of us through the Financial Planning Association, additional sessions are coming up and additional questions will keep being answered. And at least we'll point you back to, if we can't answer it or you have an advisor, we're going to point you back to these are the important facets of your situation. Let's make sure we get that answer for you. And again, continue to work with the group here, and we all are here to support you in every way we possibly can.
Thank you so much, Eileen. And just FYI, this is the first one of our workshops where we didn't announce the appointments just because we didn't know there was another one available. So now it sounds like we will get that organized soon because clearly I've heard this over and over from financial planners, wealth advisors that they really don't like to give generalized advice, and that makes sense. That it really is your individual situation. So our final speaker is Matt Welty. He's a local boy, born and raised, with, as I said, offices in Healdsburg and Santa Rosa, an estate planning, real estate and tax expert. So he's here to give you some overviews on all these sort of wrap up of a lot of things you've heard about tonight, and then also the PG&E litigation update. So Matt, thank you again.
Thank you, Amy. I'm humbled to be here with you guys because you guys have been living this, like people have said, every day. So thank you for allowing me to address you. I'm going to be a little bit like Jim Cramer on the TV show, where I'm a little bit like a lightning round because I've got quite a few topics to hit, and you guys, it's been a long day, and I'm sure your eyes are glazing over. So I'm going to be real quick, and then if you have specific questions that I can help with, then please come talk to me afterwards. First topic I'd like to address is the estate planning component. And we've asked, people are raising hands before, so I'm going to ask one more time. Who here in the room, please by show of hands, has an estate plan in place? Hands, let me see hands. Well, the answer is actually all of you do. Because if you don't have one that you drive, the state of California has one for you in the codes. And so, why that's important is some of you may not have ever thought that you have assets necessitating, I've had a long day, a trust. But the law is such that if you have more than $150,000 in a bank account in your personal name, and something unfortunately should happen to you tomorrow, unexpectedly, your estate is now subject to probate. So you may have a large chunk of cash, for example, sitting in a personal bank account that you're planning to use for rebuild or whatnot. But unless you have it in a bank account with a transfer on death designation, or you have in a bank account titled in the name of a trust, then your estate is going to have to go through a lot of complicated hurdles in the probate department to handle that issue. So my advice to you is, if you've never thought you've had enough assets to warrant a trust in that before, maybe rethink that and go talk to somebody about your needs for your specific purpose. That's sort of one quick little tidbit about estate planning as it relates to your fire. Transitioning into tax, for example, and I'm going to defer anybody on tax issues to their respective CPAs. I'm not a CPA, but I know enough to be dangerous. And what I would say is that you may know this, but you may not. If you lost your home in the fire, the IRS has deemed that as a sale. It's called an involuntary conversion. And you're on the clock to do something about that. Generally you have 3 years to replace that, but with a national or a declared disaster, they extend it to 4 years. And the key thing there, and you should talk to all your respective CPAs about this and make sure you handle this correctly, is that you need to elect in your 2017 tax return the appropriate election to handle this issue so that you're not hit with a gain unexpectedly on your taxes. So, and there are critical recording and tax keeping elements that your CPA needs to do every year that you file your returns until such time as you've replaced your home. If you do not do this, within a period of about 4 or 5 years, they can come back and hit you with interest and penalties on the full amount of money that you realize from the quote-unquote sale of your home. So really talk to your CPA, make sure that your tax situation is handled appropriately as it relates to your situation. And another tidbit about that, and you should again speak to your CPA about this, is that it's important to keep your the claim, not necessarily your insurance claim, but your tax filing claim with the IRS open as long as you possibly can, especially if you're one of these folks who opted into PG&E litigation. Because if you close your tax claim prior to any sort of settlement with PG&E, hopefully for you all, then you foreclose the ability to be very creative with the allocation and characterization of those proceeds. And that can have detrimental downstream effects for your taxes. So you really want to make sure that you're talking to your CPA about that issue as well. And that sort of dovetails into PG&E litigation update. We have a trial date. So PG&E trial date is set for September 23rd, 2019. The first fire that is going to be tried is the Atlas fire. That was a bone of contention between the plaintiffs and the defense. PG&E really wanted it to be Tubbs because they really wanted to confuse with a lot of complex issues. And the plaintiff side said, no, we want Atlas, and the judge saw it our way. So September 23rd, 2019, it's going to be tried in San Francisco. And what that is called a bellwether trial. So what they want to do with bellwether trials is they want to get a representative sample of a sort of a damages calculation that can be representative of the larger group of folks that suffered a loss of that respective fire. And so the judge has ordered that 10 to 15 individual plaintiffs be put forward between the two sides, plaintiffs and defense. There will be an agreement about that. And then those specific plaintiffs will go out first in the trial. The damages calculation from that will be used to inform the rest of the plaintiffs for that fire in any sort of mediated settlement. So it's and the judge was not playing around actually. He said, look, we're going to schedule these trials, we're going to schedule them right up one after another for all the respective fires, and some are going to go out on the same day in different courtrooms at the same time. So he's really pushing the issue. That being said, there's been depositions, discoveries ongoing. PG&E is actively seeking, and you may have been contacted if it applies to you, recipient witnesses, meaning eyewitnesses, to ignition events. So that's ongoing. And also statute of limitations, I should say that. So there's a 3-year statute of limitations for the date of the fire as it relates to inverse condemnation. But that's really not the operative statute of limitations that's really controlling this matter. It's going to be the 2-year negligence, because that's where you find most of your uninsured losses, like emotional distress, and those types of parts of your claim are going to be really bound up in a 2-year statute of limitations period. So between now and really September 23rd, which is the trial date I just mentioned, is your window of time to talk to a lawyer and decide before your hat in the ring if you think that's appropriate for you. Once the trial goes out on September 23rd, they estimate that first trial will take 8 weeks. Most likely is they won't resolve that until after that 2-year statute of limitations has come and gone. So depending on the results of that trial, if it goes very poorly for PG&E, no more people can jump in because the statute will run. And they did that very strategically about when they timed that trial. So just if you're thinking about it, the one thing you should be doing between now and talking to that lawyer is you should be documenting all of your damages to the extent you can. You've been doing that with your insurance claim, but there's also things you should be doing. For example, if you had trees removed already, you should go out and you should measure the trunks and take accurate notes of everything, because if you're doing further reconstruction work and things have to be scraped and moved, I mean, it's not a crime scene, but it's an evidence scene, and that's specific to you. So you need to be documenting everything you possibly can between now and talking to your respective counsels. Anyway, I'll be here afterwards. Thank you for your attention.